everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Perspective Checks, where I sit down with friends and folks from the TTRPG community to talk about the things we love or drive us crazy about this hobby we all love and share. Today, I am joined by Steve Morrison, the author and host of the Errant Adventures podcast, which is incredible, another solo TTRPG AP podcaster, and one half of the Ironsworn guys with Matt Risby, who you've also heard on this episode. Ironsworn all over here. Steve, thanks for coming on. How's it going?
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
That makes me feel special because I'm the littlest of guys, and I'm so excited to get to talk to people.
there are no little people, and there's no little guys in this world. We're all just people trying to create and make awesome shows.
I know. I spoke to someone recently about what I was talking about you before we started recording, where like, I get nervous about reaching out to people because I'm like, they're all so professional and so cool. And like, they definitely don't have my scatterbrained approach to all this, but they were saying there's no like huge gap. There's not like a big, swing between like, don't even want to use this word, but like the biggest people in the industry and like the smallest people in the industry, because in the end, we're just people playing games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's come up a couple times with social media departures and all this stuff that's happened with don't use that app, and don't support this person. And you find places like Blue Sky, and then before you know it, like you find that community and people find you that you're like, how am I on their radar kind of thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At all. So it's so great. And these episodes have become some of my favorite for my podcast, to just sit down and talk to people and create these, connections that hopefully I can, hopefully we all stay in touch and talk. But how are things going for you and Errant Adventures? And
pretty good. It's been a fun kind of year as I've moved into my newest campaign, and I'm now about 30 episodes into it. And I, in 2023, kind of had to take a little bit of a step back because of some life circumstances, and just was hitting a little bit of a point of burnout trying to release an episode every week.
I hear you.
Yeah. And it's funny. I look back at my early years, because I started this in essentially 2021, beginning of 2021. It was like my first episode dropped like the 28th of December of 2020. And I was doing like hour and 15-minute episodes every week for like 3 years. And it's just, now I'm like, if I get 25 minutes in an episode, that's a good episode. And I release those every 2 weeks. I'm just like, so I feel like there have been some changes in life and just the world in general that makes it more challenging to create and just to have that energy and that excitement for it. And so I had to take that step back to regain some of that excitement and some of that energy. But what it had, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit, but it has changed the way that I make the show, and I think makes it better, but definitely my process has changed a lot. And so I'm just now kind of feeling like I'm settling into that process change. And so now I kind of feel like things are moving along pretty nicely, and I'm excited about the campaign that I'm in right now. I'm excited about this little side campaign that I'm doing as well. So yeah, things are going well.
And I love the 30-minute episode, like that. Yeah. That range for me, I've tended to somehow, my goal was always like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, like that. I think that's like the most I feel comfortable putting out. And I've gone a little above that with a lot of stuff lately. With these episodes, interviews, I let them go, hour and a half if the juice is flowing. But I feel like maybe it's a solo thing, but even with like my home group, we've kind of pared our group sessions down to like 2 hours, because I feel like more digestible, focus on like just hit the ground running and get stuff done, and like end when it feels right. You know what I mean? Like don't force yourself to hit some like hour-long mark or something like that. And I love like downloading new episodes. I like going to my podcast, like new episode, and then it's like 30 minutes. Oh, it's gonna be sweet. You know what I mean? Like I love it. I can get through this and like not in the middle of my workday pause it 5 times. Or whatever,
Yeah, and I think that is something that when I first started podcasting, the Glass Cannon podcast, Glass Cannon Network, like they were a huge influence on me. And they, were doing like hour-long episodes.
Yeah.
And those felt really snappy and like really good. You could feel like you could get some progress through there. And I think similarly, I've kind of come to this realization of like, that works because you have a group of people playing. And so there are different voices, there's interaction, all this different stuff. Whereas with a solo game, I mean, it's just me.
Yeah.
And, I shouldn't expect people to want to listen to an hour and 15 minutes of me doing really terrible voices and trying to do everything all myself. And so it's like, yeah, paring that down to like 20 to 30 minutes, it seems like that's probably a little bit more digestible and maybe a little bit more palatable to listeners who don't want to listen to hours and hours and hours of me just talking to myself, which is why it's fun to do kind of the collaborative episodes because you can let those breathe a little bit more.
Yeah. I think you got to give your voices a little more credit. They're better than mine, that's for sure.
I don't know. It's every time I'm like, well, I'm just committing to the bit, and if I can call him out, Matt gave me one of my favorite compliments ? Which is he's like, you know what I really appreciate about your voices, Steve? It's like you really can't like they don't really correlate with any actual real accents. So it just sounds like, a fantasy accent.
Yeah, there you go. You can just say like, actually, I've done so much work. Tolkien-esque, if you will.
It's purely intentional.
That's right. All right. Well, we're going to get into quite a bit of what we touched on just now as far as like your process and the changes you've made in the last couple of years. But first, I always have to ask the same 3 questions to everybody who comes on a Perspective Checks episode, just to get to know you a little bit and do the intro stuff. So, Steve, how long have you been playing TTRPGs or been in or around the hobby?
Yeah. So I have always been a science fiction fantasy nerd. My grandma gave me a box set of Lord of the Rings when I was 8 years old, and that was truly the beginning for me. And I often say that from the ages of 8 to 16, I essentially only read Lord of the Rings. So
wow.
I would just read it, get to the end, and then I would just start over again. And so it became hugely influential to me. And I started branching out into some other fantasy books after I was 16, and started reading, didn't realize it at the time, but started reading some of the like Drizzt Do'Urden D&D novels, the R.A. Salvatore novels. I didn't know what D&D was at the time, but I was like, oh, there's, a fantasy novel with an elf with 2 swords on it. Like, that seems cool. Let's go.
Yep.
So I was like, oh, this is awesome. So when I went to college in my freshman year, in our college dorm for the like orientation, they were like, everybody go around and like say a fact about yourself. And so mine was that like, I'm super into Lord of the Rings. I've read every single Tolkien Lord of the Rings related book out there, blah, blah, blah. Well, like 2 weeks later, I'm in the common room and I'm looking over and there's a guy sitting in a chair and he's reading a Lord of the Rings book that I'm like, I don't know what that is.
Oh.
So yeah, so I walk over and I'm like, hey, what is this book? I don't recognize it. And he's like, oh, it's Lord of the Rings role-playing game. And I was like, what does that mean? And
whoa.
Yeah, he was like, well, you create a character and somebody runs the game and you play in Middle Earth. And I was like, hold on a second. You mean I can create my elven avatar and play in this world that I love so much? He's like, yeah. I was like, okay, when are we
See
playing?
There.
Yeah. So that was my...
Was this Middle Earth role playing, or was this one of the...
This was the Decipher Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think I packed it into a box, but I still have the book that I, like, the next day I went out and bought, because I was like, well, I must have it.
Right.
So this was 2005. So I got into playing that. We played that for a few months and then transitioned to D&D. Played 3.5 for a few months, and then we did the D20 Star Wars RPG for a couple of years, and then let's see, played a campaign of Vampire the Masquerade that is still one of my favorite campaigns.
Oh,
and it is one of my favorite campaigns because it was a moment where I was like, I get this. Like, I understand this game. And nobody else that I was playing with did. And so they were all trying to play like D&D heroes.
Right.
And I went
Not the point.
so hard into being just an anti-hero, into just pure villain.
Yeah.
That at the end of the campaign, I had worked it out such that I had been making secret deals with all of the other players and not like telling each other and building up my power. And so the end of the campaign was basically we were on a mission from the prince. We show back up having completed the mission. I kind of circumvented some stuff and like stole some more power. And essentially I challenged the prince in the middle of the like hall and turned to the other players and I was like, you're either with me or against me. And nobody knew it was coming except the game master and the storyteller and half the group. And we were playing, this was a college group. So there were like 6 or 8 of us. Yep. So we had a pretty sizable group. And it was like half were like, we're with you. And the other half were like, no, this is wrong. And so it turned into like PvP and like that makes it sound awful, but everybody was having a blast. Like, everybody was like really jazzed about it. But it's one of those that like, 20 years later, I'm like, I still think about that campaign. From there, we played more D&D, we played more Star Wars RPG, and then I graduated and just kind of forgot about role-playing games for like 2 years.
Figuring out what comes next.
Yeah, it was one of the weirdest things, looking back on it, of my life, where I just kind of, I finished college, I packed up everything, I was trying to figure out what was happening next. I moved away, was living in a place for like a year and a half, came back, and a friend of mine in my hometown was like, hey, you played like D&D and stuff in college, like, would you run a game for us? And I just had this moment of like, oh yeah, I did play that. That was a lot of fun. Where are my dice? And I had like, and I like pulled the stuff out and it's been an obsession ever since.
Yep. I love those stories though, where you play a campaign and it just sticks with you. I know that like when I first started, I went from like player to GM so fast because I had like a very brief experience being introduced to the game. And then that person lived like 3.5 hours away. So it was like, oh, well, I don't have this person who knows how to play this game, but now I really want to play this game and I can tell my friends. And it was like, I'm just going to put on the GM hat and I just started doing it. And, honestly, my favorite stories of like, we had a group. I worked third shift as a park ranger, like summers between college and third shift. I mean, you're doing nothing.
Yeah.
So it was like, you got a half-hour lunch and we were like, sure. We'd play like 1.5 hour long D&D sessions every night of our third shift,
The dream.
And did we play it right? Absolutely not. It was 3.5 and I was still new and I was like, nope, we're just going to whatever works.
Yeah.
But actually, this is the second time Worlds of Darkness games have come up, and that is somehow a massive gap in my RPG experience. I need to get in a vampire game is what I need to do.
I haven't played any of the World of Darkness stuff since that campaign. I tried to run a like short-lived mage campaign like the next year, but we just our school schedule and everything, we got too busy. We had too many games going anyways, so there wasn't enough time for that. But it is kind of interesting how I think a lot of people, especially a lot of people who end up being like game masters or like creators of shows and stuff like that, their story is like, oh, well, I was introduced to the hobby and then immediately had to start GMing in order to play.
Yeah.
And that was not my experience at all. I ran one, maybe two games in college, and it wasn't until that friend was like, "Hey, you played in college. Like, can you run a D&D campaign for us?" that I actually started game mastering. So I had years of being a player,
Yeah,
before I ever kind of had to settle into that game master role. And then because I had the experience at that point, I then was the game master for the next like 10 years,
yeah.
until my current group formed, where there's another player in that group who has been GMing since he was 13. And so we just kind of trade back and forth, which is really nice.
Yeah, that is the best when you can find a group of people who are like, I'll take over for a few, like take a few weeks off, take a couple months off. So obviously you've played a lot of games going back to when you started till now. What have you been playing lately? And obviously you have your podcast, so you could say what you've been playing lately, but any other maybe surprising ones? I know with Matt, you have your let's play these games by the end of the year goals
Yep.
that you guys set. So
Yeah, so on the podcast, I'm currently playing Traveler, which is a lot of fun. That's my kind of first foray into Traveler, and it's been on my radar for a while, but it's the first time I'm kind of really delving into it. And I'm really enjoying it. I do enjoy the kind of crunch to it, and the fact that it is kind of modular, so you can just play it as, oh, I've got 2d6 plus a stat and an ability, and that's all I need. Or you can add on all of these additional kind of subsystems, which is a lot of fun. But I must confess that I am missing Starforged quite a bit, especially because I have been playing Ironsworn Sundered Isles. That's another game. I just played a session of that yesterday that I've been playing recently, and just kind of going back into the Ironsworn ecosystem and just being like,
yeah.
oh, it's like, it's so smooth and like velvety, and it's like a warm hug.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely, I'm like, oh, I may return to Starforged for the next book. I'm calling these books instead of episodes for this campaign. So Traveler, Ironsworn, Sundered Isles. I'm also in a D&D campaign that I'm running right now, which I swore to myself that I would never run D&D again, because it's not really my wheelhouse. I tend to prefer more narrative focused games, and I tend to prefer games where the prep is more about prepping situations and challenges, and not necessarily mechanical preparation of like monsters and like, oh, this, I need to figure out what the CR of this encounter is, and I've got my budget. I'm like, I do enough of that in my day-to-day real life. I don't need to do that in my game playing as well. So unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I have a really awesome regular group of friends that get together almost weekly to play tabletop role-playing games. So I can't complain about that, because as a group of adults, it is rare to have a group that actually meets. I would say, 3/4 of the year we meet weekly.
Yeah. Yep, that's the dream.
They tend to prefer D&D, and they will humor
the comfort zone.
Yeah, they will humor me when I introduce indie games to them. We usually play, a couple sessions, and then it's like, well, when's the next like D&D campaign? So we're kind of in this lull where our D&D GM is, he's like, I'm not quite ready to run another campaign, but we also, I think part of it is that we're all looking for a little bit of like comfort food when it comes to RPGs. And in this case, for our group, that means just kind of a little bit more hack and slash D&D, still some role play, but something that nobody really has to think too much about. Because we were in the middle of a City of Mist game that was pretty intricate, and I was running that, and there was a lot of it was getting a little too real with
Okay.
everything that was going on. And there were some requests of like, hey, can we just like delve through a dungeon and fight some monsters and not have to like think about politics and
Hmm.
intrigue and all that stuff. So I've been running that lately, but one of our players is going to be out this week, so I'm hoping to do a one shot of Eat the Reich,
Yes.
which I'm super excited, and it's on my list of games to play this year as part of the Ironsworn guys. So I got to check that off, and then I'm hoping next week, because we have another player who's missing, we're going to do a one shot of Stars Without Number, because I've been
Oh yeah.
wanting to run that for a while. And when I was originally thinking about this current campaign in my solo show, I was like, am I going to continue with Starforged? Because I love it. I could play Starforged every day for the rest of my life, and I would be happy. Do I want to try something else? And if I'm going to try something else, what is that something else going to be? And the two that I narrowed it down to were Traveler and Stars Without Number. And
Yeah.
I just kind of thought about it for a while, and then I was like, you know what? I like the idea of Stars Without Number, but I think that Traveler is going to fit a little bit better what I'm looking to do. So I went with Traveler. I think that was the right decision, but I'm excited to try out Stars Without Number to kind of see how that feels. And I'm kind of hoping that because it has that D&D-esque, like you roll a D20 for some of the checks, that it's gonna tickle the senses of my players, where they might be like, well, this is close enough, but also is different enough that it's like, well, this could be something fun that we could run a longer campaign with. So
Yep.
That's most of the games that I've been playing recently, or hope to be playing recently.
Right. Yeah, and busy and great. Yeah, and I think you said something, and this is getting a little off topic, but something you said just like, I was like, oh, I got to write this down. Is that you were like, I prefer my GM prep to be more like scene and like, how do I challenge my players in a situation versus mechanically challenge my players in a situation. And I never thought of it like that, but I think that is, I think maybe the disconnect that most, what's the word I'm looking for here? I need to say this right so I don't offend people. But like hobbyist TTRPG people who play D&D and like that's what they know, that's their home base. They're used to the challenge being, how do we beat this monster?
Yeah.
Right? And like, I've said this to people before, like in D&D, the answer to any question, the answer to any challenge and scenario is on your character sheet. You just have to point to the thing and be like, I athletics it because I'm good at that. And like that has a mechanical outfall, and you can just point to the thing. You don't have to think like in the narrative and come up with the thing that you're doing and then figure out what it is you're, you know what I mean? Like you can play it like that. But I love the idea of being like, I'd much rather think of the situation that challenges my character's beliefs, or like, their character development, as opposed to their ability to shoot their bow. you know?
And that's where I really appreciate games like Blades in the Dark. And that's, for a long time, Blades in the Dark was my favorite role-playing game.
It's very good.
and then I found Ironsworn, and that knocked Blades down a step. But I would say it's still one of my favorite games to run, especially for a group, because almost all of the prep that I do for a Blades campaign, which is fairly minimal, is just going, okay, what factions are interested in like what's going on in this circumstance, and then everything else comes out in play as the characters engage with the system, and they try to complete their scores and stuff like that. And then it's all like reactive for me to then be like, okay, so if you're doing that, well, I'm going to introduce this complication over here. And the game really lends itself to that interaction. And you don't have to worry about, well, this encounter is too dangerous because this ancient dragon has 247 hit points, an armor class of 23, and a plus 12 to its 4 claw attacks and 1 tail attack and breath weapon. It's like you don't have to worry about any of that mechanical stuff. You can just think about what are these complications, and so that way you can really ratchet up the tension, the excitement, all of those things. And that's not to say that you can't get tension from playing a mechanically heavy game. And there are some people who love to build those encounters, and I like more power to you. Like, go for it. I enjoy playing in a D&D campaign with a DM who is very like, okay, I'm going to put these pieces together for the encounters and make it challenging. I enjoy playing that. I just don't want to run that.
I would agree with that, and there are ways to like you said, you can make the character tension happen in D&D, but like it takes more work. Whereas for something like Blades, you kind of go, what have they done? What are the consequences of that? Who cares? You have your factions, and then basically your notes can just be like, based on your characters, it's just like, how do I push this person's buttons? Like that's it. Like that's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like let them make a mess of it, and then it's just it writes itself. It's great.
Exactly. Yeah. It's great. It's the best.
And speaking of systems that have a way for you to go with the consequences of your actions and write themselves, this is perfect for question number 3. Already a half hour into this episode, but I think we've already begun touching on the topics we're going to talk about. What are we here to talk about today?
Yeah, so we're kind of talking about role-playing games as like writing tools, and then also because we do a lot of solo RPGs. Like, how do you kind of create a narrative as a solo player, and how is that different, or is it different from writing a book or any other sort of like creative fiction
that you're just doing on your own?
That you're just doing on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm sure you've heard this. I hear it all the time, especially like with people that I'm talking to who are used to D&D, and I'm like, oh, well, like this is actually a solo game. I remember when I was doing my Koriko solo series here for my podcast, which is like a magic. It's like Kiki's Delivery Service, the RPG, right? You just play a year in a 16-year-old witch's life.
Nice,
super cozy. It was great. But I'm sitting at my lunchroom at work, and I'm like flipping tarot cards, and I'm starting to just journal. And this person comes over to me, and I run games at lunch at my work, and they come and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm playing a role-playing game. And they're like, 1, you don't have dice. 2, there's no one here. And 3, you're just writing stuff down. Like, they were like, why don't you just write it as a book? I don't understand. Like, what is it that you need to do from this that, makes it different than just sitting down and thinking this stuff through? And I've heard that criticism so many times where people are like, I can't get into solo because why don't I just write a book? But like, obviously I don't feel that way. And believe me, I've tried to start Google Docs where I'm like, starting a book, click, 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 click. And then I'm like, what the heck? I don't know how to go. I don't know how to do this, but I can sit down and play a solo RPG. What is it that you like about playing solo, and what does it provide for you in a way that you're not just sitting down writing a book? But I know you are also a writer, so.
Yeah, and that's so my first experience with Ironsworn, which that was my introduction to solo role playing, as it is for many people. And I had a similar reaction when somebody, like, I read about solo role playing. I was like, how does that even work? Like, why would you play solo? Like, isn't the point is to be with other people? And like, but I sat down, and the way that I started playing Ironsworn was I just opened a Google Doc and I set a scene, and then I would come to a point of conflict, and I would read the rules, and then I would roll the dice, and then I would write that down, and I just basically was scripting or writing a book, and then engaging with the mechanics when there was any sort of like challenge point. And I did that for like 2 or 3 sessions, and I went, well, this is dumb. Like, I'm getting frustrated because I'm stopping my narrative flow, my writing flow, to engage with these mechanics. Like, I know what needs to happen next. Like, this is getting in the way.
Yeah.
So I stopped. And I was like, forget about it. Like, this isn't for me, clearly. And I walked away from it for a while. and then was thinking about it, and I was like, I want to try this again, but I need to approach it differently. Because fundamentally, to me, I said that same thing to myself, which was, well, why not just write a book?
Yeah.
Because I've done that. I haven't published them, but I've written a couple of 120,000 word novels, and like this. Please understand that I'm not being arrogant.
No.
But it like I know how to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I know how to do it well, or that I'm the best writer in the world. I'm not, but like I understand how to sit down and write a story from beginning to end, and I have an internal sense of the beats of a story and narrative tension and all of these things. So why would I limit myself, quote unquote, myself by writing, but also hacking on this system that controls the way that I tell the story?
Yeah, because there might be times where, like you said, you're sitting and you stop in the middle of it, like you're ramping up to something and then you're like, oh, I got to roll. But like in your mind, the writer was like, I know what I want to happen, but the dice go, maybe that doesn't happen. And then you're like, well, that's not, well, duh. You know what I mean? Like, damn it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So that's where, when I decided to try playing Ironsworn again, that's where I came up with the idea. It was kind of twofold. So I had the idea of like, okay, I clearly can't sit down and journal a game of Ironsworn. But also, if I just sit down and kind of like jot down a couple notes to myself and roll dice, I'm not going to remember anything that happens. I have a terrible memory when it comes to that. Like, I need to write notes to stuff, and my calendar is full of reminders to remind me to take medication, or remind me to return the drill bit that I borrowed from my friend. It's anything, like literally anything. I'm like, if I don't set a reminder, I had a friend text me this morning because we were talking about something on Friday, and I was like, I'll send you this. If I don't send it to you by Sunday morning, text me because I'll have forgotten about it. And he texted me this morning, and I was like, thank you. I forgot. And I sent it to him. So I was like, I have to do something to record the story. Otherwise, it will be meaningless because I won't know what's going on. So I came up with the idea of, well, I'm going to take Ironsworn because I like the idea of the system, but it wasn't working with my writerly senses. I'm going to take Ironsworn, I'm going to hack it a little bit, and then I'm going to use it to tell a sci-fi story in my sci-fi universe and record it into a microphone. So I bought like a $10 microphone off of Amazon, sat down, recorded like 5 episodes, and that character is the character who is kind of the main character in my current campaign. So I was like, I wanted to come back to it at some point. But I played like 5 sessions of that, and I was like, well, this is fun, but it's a lot of work editing and like, even just like listening back to it. So I was like, you know what, that's fine. I got busy, whatever. Well, fast forward to then 2020, we've got the Starforged playtest is announced, and I signed up for it. I was looking at the materials, and I was like, this is really cool, and this would fit with kind of what I was doing. And I was seeing that a lot of people were writing up their playtests and then posting them on the playtest Discord. And I was like, well, that's cool, but I wonder if it would be helpful for the designer if I recorded myself going through the setting truths and playing a couple sessions of the game, so that instead of like reading somebody typing out like, I did this and I think this and blah blah blah, you could actually hear me, quote unquote, live,
deliberating,
experiencing the game. So I did that. I recorded the truths and character creation. I recorded a session of playing the game, and I just popped them up on the Discord. And Sean was like, this is really good. You should consider like throwing this onto a podcast feed. And Errant Adventures was born.
Wow. Hey, you had the
Yeah.
ultimate approval to go ahead and post this.
Yeah, and who knew it was going to spiral into 4+ years of creating stories, which is amazing. But oftentimes when people ask me like, what is your podcast about? The way that I approach it, and that's why I wanted to talk about this topic, is I kind of circumvent that question of why not just write a book by saying, so what I'm doing is basically I'm writing a book.
Yeah.
But instead of writing it by typing it into a computer, I'm narrating it into a microphone like an audiobook. And then I'm using a game system to any point when I reach a moment of conflict, I use dice and random tables to inform what happens next, rather than just deciding as the author. And in that way, I build and shape this story. And when I explain it that way, I think most of the time people are like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so there isn't like, I don't get that same like, well, why wouldn't you just write a book? Because I've already kind of set that expectation of like, oh, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I'm basically creating an audiobook
first.
But I'm making it. Yeah, I'm making it up as I go along, which is how I write too. So it's.
I was going to say
it
works very well for the pantsers of the world, not the plotters. That you tell this to a plotter and they're like losing their mind, like the sweat just starts dripping.
Yeah, well, and that's why there are really fantastic audio dramas that are like fully scripted out and produced.
Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
Like that's a great thing for somebody who is a plotter. I mean, this works really well for me because I'm just like, I sit down, I'm like, I have an idea of where I'm going, but I have yet in all of my writing, I have yet to actually hit the end point that I thought I was going to when I started the story. Because I always start with a beginning and I start with an idea of where I want to end. And I've never hit that end point. I've always found a different ending that I've always liked better. So I'm just like, this works for me. So
yeah, I mean that's even better, right? Like, it's not that you missed the ending and you're like, oh crap, I gotta circle around. It's that you found a different one. And you're like, oh, even better.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And that just comes from like as the story develops, you're like, oh, I thought it was going to be this thing, but I've now set up all these other things, and if those all come together, it's going to be even cooler. And that's honestly like that's how I run games, and I think that's why I like lower prep RPGs as a game master, because prepping feels like outlining.
Wow. Yeah. No, you're right.
And I'm just like, I don't want to do that. I want to experience the story in the moment and find out where it's going as we play.
Yeah. From solo, obviously, we know why this works for you and works for me and the people who love these systems. But I didn't think about that as a GM. You're right. Like, my notes, my prep notes are usually like a sticky pad, with a couple of just little prompts on it or something like that, especially because with my solo stuff, I play so many things like from the Ironsworn family where it's here's your oracles and like roll up a couple words and go, wait a second, what could this be?
Yeah.
But yeah, I never thought of that. Like the collaborative nature of games, even for games that aren't supposed to be like that. I so much prefer when a player is like, I have an idea. And I'm like, please take over, make it a canon thing. Because not only does that give me ideas, because your idea will always be made better by someone else saying how they are interpreting it.
Yes.
Whether it's because you realize, what you didn't want to convey, or because it's legitimately just a better idea. And then they have way more buy-in now because their idea's in there, So when you're solo and you don't have those other people giving you those ideas, you can find it in the moment from a dice roll and you go, oh, wait a second. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the oracles. And I was a non-believer for a long time. I was like, random tables, I don't need those. Like I'm an artist. I'm a creator. I'll make it all up myself. And now I'm like, there's random tables. Hell yeah, we're gonna roll on those tables.
Every chance I get. That's right.
Yeah. And I'm like, I now, in this D&D campaign that I'm running, like I sit there with my, I've got like maze rats
Yeah.
printed out, and I can just like flip through that real quick to a table and like roll a couple of dice and be like, oh yeah, okay, this. Or I'll keep like the Starforged reference guide next to me and just pop open action and theme and like roll a couple dice. And it's like, oh, yep, I got an idea. Let's go.
This NPC just
So
got so much cooler because their goal is wait a
yeah,
what?
exactly. And so I think it is really, it's important playing solo to utilize those tools. And that's where I think as a writer, I really enjoy kind of coming up with a world and coming up with characters and coming up with conflicts and doing all these things. But it's also really nice to kind of have a buddy with me that I can turn to. And I have not done this yet, where I use like the Mythic GME as a writing tool or anything like that. Mostly because currently most of my writing time is taken up by creating a show.
Yeah.
And I think we can get into, I don't know if you want to get into it now or if you want to come back to it a little bit later, but that's part of the process change. I had some realizations, but I think that one of the cool things about playing a solo RPG is that you're creating some boundaries and some like a framework for your creativity. And I think one of the reasons that people struggle so much with a blank sheet of paper is because, well, the possibilities are infinite. Whereas if you have a like more defined box where you're like, okay, well, we're going to play within this world. Here is our situation. We're kind of like bringing the box, narrowing it down a little bit. Here's our world. That's a larger box. Then the situation is a smaller box. And then my character is a smaller box. And we're like, okay, now I have a place to start from. And playing, I mean, like we can create anything we want as writers, as creators. But when you play a game, you have this system to lean on, and that helps to bolster your creativity, helps to guide your creativity. And I think that is the thing that I'm super excited about. I love writing. I love playing tabletop role-playing games. Why wouldn't I put those together and make something that is my favorite hobby, which is this amalgamation of these two things that I love so deeply?
Yeah, I love that. I literally just had an interview the other day with one of my friends from the DMs After Dark, and we were talking about sandboxes because he's been running a long-term RuneQuest game for our friends on the stream, and that world is enormous, and it is so setting dense, and he thinks, he said, it seems like a barrier to entry, right? And it seems like when you have something that big and there's so many defined things that the options are both simultaneously infinite for what to do, but also stifling because you don't want to break the rules of what's established, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of solo games, especially like Ironsworn, you have your setting, and there's a lot that you don't want to get wrong, but that's the beauty of the truths, right? Like technically, there is no canon setting. There's just the setting that you develop at the very beginning. But, so you have that box, like you said, and then you can kind of just bounce around within it. And it does confine and refine your creativity. And there doesn't have to be a start and an end goal. It's more about figuring it out. And the beauty of things like oracles and moves generating consequences that you then need to like figure out what that means without a discrete, this is it. You know what I mean? And technically there are, right? Like some is just like suffer harm -2, but I know most people I've talked to that play Ironsworn are like, that's the boring one. I'm going to envision future problems. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
But you kind of cede some of your own control, which is really funny in a solo game, right? Like you said, like the writer just goes, I'm not giving up control. I know what's happening. I'm going to write it. But giving yourself the opportunity in a solo game to be like, it's the buddy that isn't there. It's a book that's saying like, or,
Yeah, and that's why, as much as I love playing solo, I think that co-op Ironsworn
it's the best mode.
Is the best Ironsworn.
Hard agree.
I was just having this conversation with Matt yesterday. I have another friend, my other game master in my local group. I've released 4 episodes of an Ironsworn co-op game that we played together, and we recorded our 5th episode like last January 2024, and then have not played at all. And we were talking yesterday, and I was like, we really need to like carve out time to do that, because it is so life-giving to both of us to like fuel each other in creativity. And that's what it is. Like playing co-op, you have the opportunity to say, I've got an idea. And then your co-op player can be like, I have something to add to that idea. Or can say, what about this idea over here? And then the two of you can be like, oh, actually, I really like your idea. Let's go with that. But let's put this little twist on it. And it really makes for an amazingly immersive and just like creatively at least to me, creatively fueling experience.
Yeah, because the thing with co-op that I love so much about it, and I played it with my wife, like when I first got Ironsworn way back, I was like, okay, we're going to sit down, we're going to do this. And my wife is very much I don't want to think too hard, like she likes playing like D&D and, knowing the concrete problem in front of her and solving that problem in interesting ways. She definitely goes outside the box. So I'm like, so you're going to love narrative. And then we played Ironsworn, and I think we both loved it, and like it was so fun to bounce ideas off of her. But she's like it gets rid of the GM role in co-op, which is cool. Like you're kind of both players are both GM and player. And when I put that responsibility on her, she was like, "Can I just like tell you like other?" I was like, "Yes, this is when we start, doing this." And I saw the light bulb click, and she was like, "Okay." But then we ended up. We didn't play as much of it because it was, like you said earlier, we weren't writing our huge play report. Like neither of us were journaling it. And then we didn't record it with a microphone. So we had like bullet notes or whatever. And we sat down like 2 weeks later to be like, let's play these characters again. We were like, what were we doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, co-op I think is my favorite. So do you want to talk about your process, how that's changed? I know you just brought that up before we jump into another thing we brought up that we might have time to hit on, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason I wanted to bring it up, because I've kind of come like full circle with my realization on Ironsworn that like I can't sit down and write and play. That just doesn't work for me. So then I started doing this where I would just sit down and I would hit record and I would play the game and just talk into the microphone for about an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half. And then I would edit that down into an hour-long episode. And I was doing that every week and was really enjoying it. And then, like I mentioned, in 2023, had some life circumstances kind of just completely destroy my creative momentum and energy. And so I took a break. And then when I came back, I felt that challenge a little bit of like, it's not as easy as it used to be. And at that same time, I was getting ready to start my new campaign. And this is the one that I switched over to Traveler for. And what I learned very quickly, because I started off that campaign doing that same exact thing of hitting record, just talking into the microphone, playing the game, and recording for like an hour, hour and a half. And what I realized is that works pretty well with Ironsworn, because Ironsworn generates its own momentum.
Yeah.
And
quite literally,
pun intended. Yes. And it is a simple enough game that once you've kind of internalized it, it's pretty easy to just keep things rolling and engage with the narrative and be able to. I felt like I could just generate things on the fly.
Yeah, figure out the next thing.
Yep. Turning into this new campaign, a couple of things happened. One, both of my Starforged campaigns that I had played previously were I just created everything on the fly. There was no set universe. I started those initial truths. I rolled on them. Everything that came about in that universe, I was generating at the table as I was recording. I reached a point where I was like, I feel like I'm bouncing around to different campaigns too much, and I want to settle into more of a, like, this is my big campaign that is the hallmark of my show. And if I'm going to do that, I want it to be in the sci-fi universe that I already write fiction in, because I've already spent time building that universe. I have characters in that universe that I like. I want to experience that, and I want to devote more creative energy towards building that, because eventually I'd like to start releasing some of the novels that I've written, write more novels. And so I started doing that. But what I quickly realized was switching over to Traveler and trying to tell a story in a universe that I've written stories in for 10, 12 years, there is a lot of narrative weight to that. And I was spending so much time, like, pausing my recording, opening up my Google Drive, going through literally dozens of documents to pull out one little reference that I couldn't think of in the moment. And I was like, you know what? I'm really struggling with this. I recorded my first episode and then promptly threw almost the entire thing away and kind of scripted most of it basically keeping the dice rolls and everything that I had done.
Yeah.
But just deleted the audio file and then re-recorded a more scripted version, because I was like, well, this is I need this to actually work and not sound like I'm just wandering around unsure of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Which is oftentimes what the first couple episodes of any of my other seasons are, because I don't know what I'm doing yet.
Yep.
I don't know where the story's going.
I feel that.
But this was even more, I felt like this was even more pronounced, because I'm trying to introduce this universe. I'm trying to bring in all this rich detail, and I'm also trying to tell an interesting story and play a game that I've never played before. So I'm learning, and it is a more mechanically crunchy game, which means it doesn't have that same momentum building that Ironsworn has, which means that is put on me more to build and keep that momentum going. And so after about, I think 10, maybe 12 episodes where I was doing half recording, and then I would, I got to this battle scene and I'm going to script that, because I kept flipping back into the book being okay, what do I do next for this? And it was just, it took me 3 hours to record, a 45-minute episode. And I was just this is not working for me. And then it would take me, another 3 hours to edit that, because there was a lot of ums and ahs. And, actually, nope, that's not how that works. I have to redo that and all this stuff. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna write a script for this battle scene, so that I don't have to, so that I can just type it out. I can stop. I can look up whatever it is, but I also have a completed thing once that's done that I can just read into the microphone, and it's all going to be cogent and put together. I'm not going to have to do a bunch of editing on it. And I did that for a couple of episodes, and then I was like, the thing that I miss the most right now, that I have felt like I haven't had the time to do, is write. Because I spend so much time narrating into the microphone and then so much time editing. I was basically doing little to no actual writing.
Yeah.
And as much as I love tabletop role-playing games, writing is my first love when it comes to a creative hobby, or a creative endeavor even.
Well, and like you said, why not meld the two and make your favorite thing? And if one of those started falling apart, then all of a sudden you don't have your favorite thing. You just have, one of them, which you still like, but it's not the same.
Exactly. So I have come full circle, and now to create my episodes, I've done this for about 20 episodes now, I sit down with a blank document, and I've got the rule book open, I've got my character sheets open, and I just start writing a narrative. And then when I come to a conflict point, or if I come to a point where I'm like, okay, I need to stop and roll up some oracles to get a sense of what's going on in this scene or in this world, in this section of the world, or whatever, then I just transition over. I just type, my thought process, essentially the things that I would say into the microphone.
Yeah.
I just type that out. And, oh, okay, now we're going to look at this, and we're going to roll on this table, and then I roll the actual dice, and I record the dice rolls, and then once that's done, I just open up my my digital audio workstation, I record, and what I've discovered is my pre-production is a lot longer because writing takes more time than just talking into a microphone. But my post-production is a lot shorter because I'm spending a lot less time stitching together something that sounds reasonable and something that sounds like natural and like I actually know what I'm talking about, rather than, because if I recorded how I did an episode previously where I would talk for like 20 minutes and then I'd be like, no, that was dumb. This is not working out. I need to go back, and then I'd stop the recording. I'd go back like 20 minutes. I'd delete that, and I'd be like, okay, I gotta remember where I was, and then all right, start again. And there'd be a lot of times where I would just be like, and so then we're going to, and in the editing, I would cut all those pauses so that it would be like, so we're going to, and it would sound a little bit, stilted, but it would sound a lot more like I knew what I was talking about than if I just left all those pauses in. Well, now, because I'm reading a script, there aren't any of those pauses. So mostly I'm just cutting out when I mess up in the recording, I just keep recording and I just, start the next, I go back a line or two and take it again. And then I just cut out those bits where I messed up, put it all together, do a little bit of audio cleanup on it, and then throw the music and stuff in there, and then that's it. So the post-production part is a lot shorter. And that was the other thing that I was realizing is okay, I'm missing doing the writing.
Yeah.
And I'm really getting tired of doing so much freaking editing.
Yep.
There may be a way to solve this problem. And so that's where I have now completely come full circle back to now I just sit down and write like I'm writing a novel.
Until you need to stop.
And then I inject the mechanics and anything I need just right into that document. And then I just read it as a script.
Yep. And then it saves you time after the post-production too, as far as writing and transcribing, if I ever need to revisit this, you have the writing, already done, where you can be like, oh, I really liked how this came out. And you don't have to listen back and be like, okay, how do I want to reword that for written versus, that's great. It's funny. I kind of do that backwards where I'll record my episode and then I go into my doc that I always start with it open. And I forget to be updating it as I'm going. But then at the end, so I know when I start the next episode, I put in those bullet things of this happens, this was the roll, these are the oracle results, you know what I mean?
Yep.
But instead, if I started with this is the idea going into and up to this moment you need to roll, it saves a lot of time.
Yeah, it does. And that's where we're not making these shows because we're making millions of dollars off of them or this is truly a passion project. And hey, if at some point I can release some novels and make a little bit of residual income off of that, that would be the dream. But this very much is a passion project.
Oh yeah.
And so I want to do the bits of it the most that are the things that I enjoy the most, and do the bits that I don't enjoy as little as possible. Because otherwise, if I just kept doing the recordings the way that I was doing, I probably wouldn't be still making the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I would have reached a point where I'm like, I don't have the time or the capacity. I mean, I even lately, like the last 2 episodes, I have finished the script, recorded and edited on the Sunday before the Sunday night at midnight release. And because I'm just like creatively drained, emotionally drained from just everything going on in the world. And I'm just like this, like if I had to spend 5-6 hours stitching together audio and listening to myself sound like an idiot and having to make myself sound at least a little bit reasonable, I would quit. I would stop. But like the thing that keeps me going is I'm like, but I get to sit down and I get to write. And that writing is an escape. And creating the show is an additional escape. And I enjoy, I think this is another thing of like, I think it's great to be like, just create something and like put it out there and don't worry about the audience. And like, if people are paying attention to it, like just like create from the heart and all that stuff. And that is 100% true. If nobody was listening to the show, I would stop doing it. Because I could just sit and write a novel by myself without having to do all that other production stuff. And I can play tabletop role-playing games with my friends. And so it's like part of it for me is that the creation of the show, like I kind of feel a little bit of an obligation to get an episode out every 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm like, there are people who listen to the show, and
someone
so
likes this. Yeah.
I don't want to let them down.
Yeah.
And that helps to keep me going as well. But really making that change of, first of all, going from releasing once a week to every 2 weeks, I mean, that was huge just to give myself that breathing room, and then changing over to doing more writing and scripting and then less of the editing post-production stuff has kind of made me enjoy the process more. And I think as a side effect has actually made it a better show.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I have always been a better writer than I am speaker. Like when I write, words, they bypass, from my brain to my fingers into the keyboard. And I don't have to struggle to like think about things. When I try to talk, I have to like drag the words from my brain to my lips, and it can be a challenge sometimes. And like my own speech patterns irritate me because I am like, why can't I sound eloquent and cogent, whereas other times I'm just like, I spend all this time trying to say something and I'm like running myself in circles, as I feel like I'm doing right now. So
I have never related to something someone has said more, which is just like, it's part editing your own voice so often.
Yeah.
And realizing the speech patterns that no one else is picking up on, but only because you've heard them so many times.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you have the benefit of having written it down, where like not only are you not just off the cuff saying stuff and then listening later and being like, oh, what was I thinking? You also have the ability to be like, that's not what I'm keeping. And then when you're reading it later, you can be like, that didn't flow out of the mouth the way I thought it would from the page. Yep. So you can.
Yeah. And there have definitely been times where I've written something and then I'm narrating it and I'm just like, well, that didn't work. Like, so I have to stop the recording, rewrite that section, and then re-record it. Cause I'm like, okay, that actually like, I can type it and I can read it, but when I actually try to say it, that number of consonants or vowels or whatever that close together is like blah, 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 blah.
Like, I'm a sucker for alliteration.
Yeah.
And like there have been times where I like tongue twister myself, where I'm like, no, I cannot say this episode after episode and not fumble it all the time.
Yeah. Can I make a quick confession?
Yeah.
Because this is so stupid. So often the thing that people say is, I hate the sound of my own voice. I hate editing myself. I enjoy the sound of my own voice. I don't know if I've
Oh.
Stockholm syndromed myself of I've just listened to hours and hours of audio of myself, but even from the beginning, like I don't really dislike the way that I sound in a recording. So I feel like that has been a huge boon to me as a creator, because I have literally listened to hundreds of hours of myself talking, and I don't hate it. I hate sometimes the way that words come out of my mouth, but I actually find the sound of my voice quite pleasant.
Yeah,
So,
you have a good deep tone. It's good.
right, which sounds like I'm just the most conceited and like just like make myself sick.
No,
But
it's funny.
I like
I
it.
edit at like 1.6 times speed because I don't
Oh
want to listen to
god,
myself so much, but then I sound even funnier because I'm like,
yeah, yeah. No,
so
I slow it down to 0.75, so it's nice and smooth. No,
get
just
that real nice, yeah.
kidding.
Um, Actually, we're gonna transition to. We're not gonna hit the closing three questions yet, but I do
Okay.
just want to touch on this one other topic that we
Mhm.
debated talking about. Maybe this will spill over and we can talk again sometime soon if this is something
Yeah.
you're still dealing with. But this came up a couple times in this conversation where you said going from Ironsworn and Starforged and then starting this new book up with Traveler, which does not generate that narrative momentum that is more helpful to you in the writing process and all that stuff that you've been dealing with. And again, we brought it up with the Ironsworn guys. You're like, I have this
Hmm.
goal to play all these games. But you've been dealing with, and this is totally understandable, and I think a lot of people who listen to this are going to feel it, some system learning burnout because there's
Yeah.
so many good games out there that we all want to play, but
Yep.
putting that time in to learn it, and if you're going to run it or play it, it can be a lot to just load your brain with. And you're debating going back to single system, maybe?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about that, and I said like I think I'm maybe going to just playing one system.
Yeah,
That's not going to happen. I
right.
mean,
Swing
that's
back real hard on the
completely
pendulum.
yeah, that's completely unrealistic. Because at a minimum, I'm going to have to play two systems, because I will not ever play D&D on my podcast
Oh
again.
yeah,
I did one short series with it, and again, I don't have anything against D&D. I really enjoy playing D&D.
but for stories and
I don't enjoy running it, and I was spending more time trying to run it than I was actually like playing when I was creating that little 3-part series. So I will at a minimum be a two system person, because my local group is going to continue playing D&D, and I will continue playing it with them. But I'm on record as saying I could play Ironsworn Starforged every day for the rest of my life. If that was the only game that I could play, I could play it every day for the rest of my life, and I would be happy. And I stand by that.
mm,
So there is a part of me that is thinking about going back to Starforged for my main campaign, probably once I end book 1 and move into book 2. I don't want to do it like in the middle of a book,
yeah.
but I also like, part of the reason I started this show is that I wanted to tell a bunch of different stories and play a bunch of different games. But I also have reached a point, and it may just be that I'm doing it wrong, where I'm trying to learn like 3 games at the same time,
Oh,
rather than like learning one game,
at a
playing
time,
that,
right?
and then learning another game. But like, we talked about Eat the Reich. Like
Hmm.
I'm hoping to run that. I'm hoping to run Stars Without Number, which I've never run before. And so those are 2 games that I don't know how to play yet. I have to learn them.
Yeah, and different amounts of like different amounts of
Yeah.
crunch, right? Like Stars Without
Yeah.
Number, Kevin Crawford has he's kind of like he's almost like a old school D&D. I don't want to say old school D&D, but like oracles and like a
Hmm.
lot of
Yeah.
options and stuff like that. So like the books
Yeah.
can be a little intimidating where it's like there's a lot of stuff to do I need to use this, do I not? Eat
Yeah.
the Reich, much simpler, but at the same
Yeah.
time you really have to know and immerse yourself in the setting, to
Hmm.
make the right feels hit. Although I think,
Yeah.
you know, I think everybody will enjoy
Yeah, I think that the subject matter will
tone
be
is
fun.
for sure.
Yeah, and that's one where it's like it doesn't really matter if you get the system exactly right.
Right. That's not
because it's just you're just playing it quickly. But it's like
put it on yourself.
Yeah, so I'm trying to learn all those. I've got other games that I'm trying to learn. I think my cat just turned on my
I saw that,
computer.
walking around.
It's like that's okay. Anyways, sorry about that.
You're good. We love a cat bomb and or like any kind of pet making an appearance.
Yeah, he is an attention hog, so he likes to get in. He'll make appearances in the Iron Sworn guys. Just kind of walking across the camera and slapping me in the face with his tail. But I think the thing for me is that I want to play a system the right way when I first play it. And that's been something that I've been talking about with Traveler, where it's like and that's part of the reason why I wanted to do more scripting and like stop doing as much on the fly recording, because like I really want to make sure that I'm getting this system as right as I can. I'm a human being, so I'm going to make mistakes, but I want to play it as written as much as possible at the start until I reach that point where I'm like, okay, I feel comfortable with the system and the bounds within the system that I know that I can put my foot on the gas a little bit here, put my foot on the brake a little bit here. I can push things around a little bit. I can, homebrew things or fudge things or whatever to really work for the style of game that I want to play.
Without infringing on what the system wants to do.
Without just utterly breaking the system.
Yeah.
And so it is challenging for me to try to learn a game, run that game, and have that feeling of like, am I playing this correctly? Am I getting all of these things right? And so I think I put an undue amount of pressure on myself to get it right when it doesn't necessarily like it matters, but it doesn't necessarily really matter in the grand scheme of things. But it's challenging, especially when I'm playing a game for the channel, for the show, because I know that I do this a lot, where I will go and listen to people play a game as a way of learning the game.
Yep.
And so I want to make sure that if I'm presenting a game, I'm doing so in a way that is faithful to the game and how it is supposed to be played as written. And I struggle a lot with that. Because
plus, you also don't want the person who is the diehard Traveler fan to be like, "What are you doing to my game?"
Exactly. Yes. And so, which, I mean, that's a whole nother topic. So I feel like part of the reason why I made that switch to Traveler is I was like, well, I feel like there's probably a larger
fan base
audience.
Yeah. Longer. It's been around for a while.
Yeah, it's been around for a while. And I fis like I have not noticed any sort of influx of new listeners. I feel like it's just met with indifference which is why I'm like, I should just go back to Starforge, because I enjoy playing Traveler, but I enjoy playing Starforge more.
Yeah, and people are there for the story, not the game, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Which, these are good things to learn, and that's all I'm doing. I'm learning.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about going back to being a single system player, it's, I think, more of I want to pare back on the amount of games that I'm trying to learn
at any given time.
give myself the freedom to be like, I like this game. Let's just play this game. Like, this game's good. We can just stay here. We don't have to go after the new shiny, because good Lord, I look at my RPG folder.
Same.
And there's
Zine Month just crushed me.
Yeah. Like, there's just so many games that I'm like, I want to play these. And I think this is the other part of it is, every year I get older, I'm like, I have less time to play games. I have hopefully not, but like, I feel like sometimes that I have fewer years ahead of me than I have behind me for like playing games.
Mm-hmm.
And something that is more important to me than playing a particular game is telling a story that makes an impact, affects someone emotionally. That's my number one goal, is to tell a story that is meaningful to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, like I want to play in my personal like gaming group, like I want to spend time with those people because they are my friends. We are not a gaming group that just plays games together. We are friends.
Yeah.
And I want to spend as much time with them having fun and playing fun games. And if we are constantly feeling like we're trying to learn a new system, and there might be some frustration that comes out from that, of like, well, I don't know why we're doing this when this thing over here works just fine. Like there are some people who want to play new games, and I'm one of those people, but I'm not necessarily surrounded by a group of friends who are like-minded in that. And I am okay with that, because I would rather spend time with them because they are good people whom I love. I would rather spend time with if that means I have to play D&D, for the next 20 years, because that's the game that everybody like enjoys enough that that's our common language, then that's totally fine with me. And so, but I need to stop forcing myself to try to learn new games, to like sucker them into learning something, a new system, when we're just gonna come back to D&D, and that's okay. And so I feel like
you have your group, right? That it's about for you, your friends. It's about spending time with your friends. With your podcast and your writing, it's about telling the story that you want to resonate with people, right? So you have and you can keep those two worlds. There's an overlap somewhere in there, right? But you have both, and the opportunity to do both is what's important.
Yeah, and I think
he's coming for that camera.
He's just all up in there. Hey, bud. Hi. And so one of the things too, of course, I say I'm like, oh, I'm only going to play one system going forward on the show. I mean, that's not true either, because I've already got ideas for like, okay, I'm going to play this for the main campaign, but then I've got this idea for the side story in the universe, and it would really like, I'm going to, it involves like giant robots, so let's play Mecha Hack or something like that.
Zoom in and
so it's like using different systems to tell different stories within my universe, but then the main campaign is going to, I think, either I'll continue to play Traveler, or I think most likely I will switch back to Starforged, just because I really miss playing Starforged. So
that's such a cool idea, right? One big setting, but depending on the story within the setting, you can play different games. That's so fun. I love that.
And that's where doing a better job of scheduling and like planning, where it's like, okay, because I used to feel like I have to release an episode every week. Yeah. And if I miss a week, I have failed.
People are gonna be up in arms. They're gonna hate me. They're gonna stop listening. Yeah, been there.
or alternatively, people will be indifferent, and that is painful as well. Mm-hmm. But I think what I'm realizing is that it is more important for me to do something that I enjoy doing, that is sustainable for me to do, and that is, I think those are the two things.
Yeah, but also feels like you're putting out a product, or you're putting out something that has been given the time it deserves, right? Like rush something out just to get something out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm becoming more comfortable with saying like, okay, I'm now taking a break. Mm-hmm. Like I've reached the end of this. We're at part 1 of book 1 has ended. I'm going to take 2 months off.
Yeah. And figure out what's coming next. I mean, trust me, trust the process.
Yep. And then that's where I think there will be room to say, okay, I'm now going to go learn this other game, and I'm going to play, 6 to 10 episodes of this story. and then I'm going to take another break of like a month or so, and then I'll get back to the main campaign. And so that way I'm not trying to learn a bunch of things all at once. I can focus. So maybe I'm not going to play only one game forever. It's that I'm going to focus on learning one game at a time and actually learning and playing that game.
Still an admirable goal that I would love to achieve myself.
Yes.
All right, let's segue to our closing 3 questions. First is, do you have any last bits of advice, wisdom, or homework for listeners?
No.
No,
I'm just kidding.
You got it all. No, it's a rewind, start over, and listen again.
Yeah. Last bits of advice, wisdom, or homework. I mean, I think my advice, it kind of depends. So if you're interested in starting your own solo RPG project, my advice for that is make sure that it's sustainable. It's something that you enjoy doing, that it's sustainable. Those are very, very important. But when it comes to playing solo, I really, truly believe that oftentimes we as human beings are like, oh, I can't start this thing until it's perfect. Like I gotta have all this information. I've got to have all this world building. I've got to know everything about my character, any of those things. And my biggest piece of advice for starting to play solo, even if you're just playing solo and you're not creating a show or anything like that. So if you're interested in playing solo and you don't know where to start, you need to figure out what is the least amount of information that you need to have in order to get started. And then you get that amount of information and then you start. And so if that means that you need to do world building and you need to build a whole city with a whole bunch of different things, and you need to know all that information to get started, great. Do that. And then get started.
Stop.
Don't
get going.
Yeah. Don't then get to the end of that and say, well, but maybe I need another city, because what if they go somewhere else?
Then you're not
just
doing
bare minimum. Yeah. If you need to script out oh man, my character, this is a huge 20-page backstory. All of these things happened in the past. Blah blah blah. These are my motivations. All that stuff. If you need to do that, great. Do that, and then start playing. On the flip side, if all you need is you're playing a cyberpunk game, you need a street with a couple of buildings, probably one of which you're going to try and sneak into. That's all you need. Get started. Just the barest minimum. You don't have to flesh out an entire world. You only need enough information to start. And that enough information looks differently for different people. Mm-hmm. So find that and then do it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to have questions no matter how much you've prepped ahead of time. Right. And let those questions be the interesting thing that drives the story forward. Right.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer. And I think one of my favorite things that has come out of Ironsworn is the idea of prep is play. And just
it should feel like it, right? It should not feel like punishment or
exactly. And that's why, not to continue harping on it, but prepping for a D&D campaign feels like I'm doing homework, and I mean that in a negative way.
Yeah.
As opposed to when I'm prepping for my Blades in the Dark campaign, I'm not thinking about the pluses or minuses of stats or abilities.
Tiers I'm okay. Factions. It's just...
Yeah, I'm like, all right, so they just stole this artifact from this warehouse in Night Market. Okay, who does that warehouse belong to? Did that come up in the session? No, it didn't. Okay, so I'm going to pick a faction.
It will soon.
It will soon, exactly. And so it's really... that's the fun part for me, is putting those narrative pieces together. Now,
if you're not cackling and giggling during your prep, just stop. Yeah. And you're not doing it.
And again, and I want to make this clear, there are people who the prep is play. Part of that is putting together those mechanical encounters, and that's fun for them and great. I like, please go do that.
More
So,
puzzly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Like
To the
Preface Play
Brennan
does
Lee
not.
Mulligans of the world who make these massive set piece battles that somehow actually matter for like the, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
oof, good on you.
Yeah.
But like, I can't be asked to do that. I will never do it as well. So
Yeah. So I'd say that's my piece of advice. I have little to no wisdom, but if I was going to offer up a piece of like homework, if you have not read Ironsworn or played Ironsworn, you should. And if
it's
you
free.
have, it's free. And if you have read or played Ironsworn and you haven't played it co-op, you should. And if you have played Ironsworn co-op and you've read it and all of those different things, I'm proud of you.
Have you actually? I meant to ask this earlier, and we're going to get off topic, but just a quick yes no. Have you ever run Ironsworn guided?
I can never just answer a yes no question, Rene. It's yes. I had an ill-fated attempt to start a podcast with my gaming group. That was the third part of my podcast that we didn't talk about, which is in February of 2020, my gaming group bought a like podcast starter set.
Oh, what a time to happen.
Right? 4 microphones, a mixing board, headphones, all that stuff. I mean, my cans right now and my arm are still from that set. I've upgraded the mic. So we had this plan to start our own podcast. I have been running a campaign of Scum and Villainy, which is the sci-fi Blades in the Dark hack set in the universe that my current book 1 is set in, my science fiction universe that I've been writing in for a long time. And we were having a blast. Like, we absolutely loved it. And we're like, we should just do it. We should make a podcast. It's a lot of fun. So we bought all the equipment. COVID lockdown happened. The equipment ended up at my house. So when I went through that process of being like, well, I should record this, play test for Ironsworn Starforged, I had all of this podcast equipment sitting in my house. So that the other part of that was like, I'm going to figure out how to use this stuff so that, in 3 weeks when lockdown ends and everything goes back to normal.
Yeah.
We'll be right back on track. Well, obviously that did not happen. And several years later, we tried to revisit that game and create a podcast for it. And during the course of that, I had convinced them to switch over to Ironsworn Starforged for that campaign. So I ran like 2 or 3 sessions guided, and for a variety of reasons, we just kind of ran out of gas on it and realized that when we were playing that campaign, when we made those characters, and we all like deeply, deeply love those characters. To this day, I mean, we still talk about that campaign. We were different people.
Yeah.
The world was different. I mean, one person, we were just different people. And so trying to return back to those characters, 3 years later, in a totally different world as totally different human beings, it just didn't work. And so the answer is yes. I have run a guided Starforged, but it only lasted for a couple of sessions. I also ran a guided session of Starforged in a game store. That was a lot of fun because this person posted in the Discord for this gaming store that was in our town a picture of the Starforged rulebook. This was right as the Kickstarter was being fulfilled. It was like, hey, has anybody heard of this game? Like, that it's really cool, and I'd love to run a game at the shop. And I was like, oh yeah, Starforged is awesome. He's like, wait, aren't you the Errant Adventures guy? And I was like, yes. He's like, are you local? I was like, yes. And so we got together, and we had, I think, like 7 or 8 people who showed up, and so he and I broke them out into 2 separate groups. And we kind of did truths together as a large group, and then broke it out. And he took like 4 people, and I took 4 people, and then we ran a couple of guided sessions, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's on my list to try, but because like
Mhm.
I've run co-op and I've obviously done plenty solo with all the Iron
Mhm.
Sworns,
Yeah.
and guided is one of those things where like, I wonder how it would feel to be like strictly on the, like
Yeah.
the Rails side of things for people. But
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you can cut all this out if you want. But I think that guided is, I think it's in there because it has to be,
yeah,
because that's what people kind
that's
of
how it feels to me.
expect.
Is like I feel like it's
Um,
by far going to be like not the weakest, but like in a weird way,
it's
asking
just
one
not,
person to be the guide is like
yeah,
antithetical to what the game's trying to do. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, why not just play a character and just make
It's
it
not really the
GM-less?
way exactly. It's not really the way that Starforged is meant to be played, I think.
Hmm.
And so I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying that it can't be fun. My take on it, because what we did is we played a couple sessions where it was guided, and then I was like, you know what? Like this is kind of silly. Let's mix it up. I'm going to create a character, and we're going to transition from guided into co-op.
That's what I'd do. Yeah.
Um, and and we did that for a couple of sessions, and then we decided to stop for no reason of the game. My experience of playing co-op, especially if I'm playing with people who don't know how to play the game, is that I'm basically acting as a game master anyways,
Yeah.
as
But
kind
you
of
just
like
happen to have.
I'm the lead game master, the facilitator,
Hmm.
and I'm usually the one that's prompting people to be like, hey, so you can take control of the narrative here.
Yeah.
It's not, we're not delineated between I am in charge of the story and you're in
My
charge of the
turn.
characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we're all in charge of the story. So what do you think is going on in the world? But like you still have to kind of have that person, especially if you're doing co-op with more than two people. If you're
Hmm.
doing just two people, you can kind of bounce back and forth if you're both comfortable with the system. But if you're playing with multiple people, you still need a facilitator. You still need somebody who's kind of in the lead, quote unquote,
Yeah.
who is the
Most
one who's,
familiar. Right.
yeah, most familiar, who's the one that's kind of driving things forward, not from a narrative standpoint, but from like a project lead standpoint of
The
like just,
manager. You need.
yeah, just being the person who's like, okay,
Yeah.
should we roll on the oracles for this? What do you guys want to do? What do you
Yeah.
think? And so that's most of what I think being the guide in guided
Yeah.
play is. You're essentially just being a facilitator, and then maybe you still roll on the oracles, or maybe you can inject more of your own thoughts and feelings without having to consult the oracles. But
Hmm.
that's really it.
All right. The second question we ask at the end here is: are there any games? This is a loaded question for you, but we've talked about a lot of them. So maybe we'll lean more on the second part of this question, which is: are there games you're excited to try or ideas you really want to try out at the table? And that could be like a particular character type that you've like
Hmm.
not really gotten a chance to do much of, or like a very specific moment.
Well, I think it's easy to say that I'm excited to play Eat the Reich.
Yeah.
That's like I'm jazzed about that. My afternoon is basically going to be reading through and like prepping to run that tomorrow. As far as like ideas that I will really want to try out at the table, I feel like I'm always looking for the narrative. So I don't necessarily come to a table with a like an idea of like, oh, this is the type of character I want to play. I'm like, what's going to be interesting to me to fit into this world and into this story. So I don't think I have anything specific to that, but I am, and this kind of like fits into your third question. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll hit pause. I'll let you ask the third question, and then we can wrap
Yeah.
it up.
Well, so if you want to roll it in and talk about the third question, that is just: what do you want to pitch, and where can people find you on the internet?
So I have just started back in February a monthly Sundered Isles playthrough on my show. And the reason I'm excited about this playthrough and this idea is that I basically had the idea of, I want to have a different guest on every month and play Sundered Isles once a month throughout the year of 2025. I had planned to play all 12 months, but I didn't get recording an episode out in January. And it actually worked out, because the idea that I had was, okay, I'm going to have these guests come on. How do I do this? I could just play a 2-hour game of Sundered Isles month after month, but that feels a little repetitive and boring. So the idea that I came to, and this is what I'm pitching here, is there are 11 truths in the truth section.
Oh.
Yeah. And I had the idea of, okay, I'm going to create a character, and I'm going to tell essentially an anthology story across the year. And every month I'm going to have a new guest come on, and I am going to ask them to pick one of the truths and roll on or select, if they want, that truth. And that will be the truth that we focus on. Each truth has a quest starter that comes with it. So we're going to use that quest starter as our guiding point for the session. And then I'm going to have them create a quick character. And then we're going to play for like an hour, hour and a half, and try to play through that quest starter and play along that truth. And every truth is going to, like, once it's been selected, that is the truth for this shared world. So if something crosses over, I just had my second recording yesterday, and I pulled in a reference from the first recording because I was like, this fits, like it fits together. So I'm trying to create this shared world with 11 different guests going through the truth. So I'm talking about it as exploring the truths through actual play, is how I've been talking about it. Yeah. So very, very
That's
excited.
So good.
That.
Oh man,
and,
that's awesome.
Hopefully it works out and I can actually keep it going. And that's why I was like, if I do it once a month, like I should be able to maintain that and also still do the other production stuff. And I haven't had an opportunity to really play much in the way of Sundered Isles. I played a little bit during the play test, but haven't played a whole lot in the last little while. And so this was also my way of being like, well, if I'm still, realistically, I'm probably playing Traveler for the next year, with the way that my current book is going. So I want to play some Ironsworn, and this is my way to do it. So I'm really excited about it. It's going really well so far. I've got two locked in and recorded. I'm excited about some of the other guests that are coming on the show. And so that's my pitch. And as far as where people can find me on the internet, I am, of course, Steve Morrison of the Errant Adventures podcast. You can find me at Errant Solo Pod on Blue Sky and Instagram, although I will warn you, I am terrible at posting. I'm usually pretty responsive because I'm usually lurking, but I am really bad about being consistent and posting. But the show is Errant Adventures. You can find it on all of the podcast apps and everything out there. It's also on YouTube, and then you can come to my website, errantadventurespod.com, and you can find some short fiction that I've written. Every year I'm like, I hope to post more, and life is busy, and but I hope to post more this year. So that is it for me. That's basically Errant Adventures. You can also find me on The Bad Spot on YouTube, Ironsworn Guys, as Rene alluded to at the beginning, a monthly podcast that myself and Matt Risby of The Bad Spot do, where we talk about Ironsworn, solo gaming, other games, and we generally have a good time talking about role-playing games and trying to infuriate the internet as much or as little as possible.
Yeah, you got to get that rage bait, right? That rage clickbait one day.
Yep.
But yeah, thank you so much, Steve. I will link all of that in the description so people can go find you and start listening and all that. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This was a great chat, man.
Thanks for having me. I really, really enjoyed this. I would love to come back.
Yes, we'll make that happen.
Awesome.
And as always, thank you for listening to another episode of Perspective Checks. Definitely go listen to Steve and Errant Adventures. His podcast is amazing. His stories are great. His Sundered Isles Truths series has been incredible, and the guests on there, you may recognize one or a few of them. And yeah, I can't recommend it enough. Go check out his links in the description and get listening. You know where to find me on the internet. You can email me at rainyplaysgamespod@gmail.com. If you want to tell me about games on your radar, somebody recently recommended a game for me to play, so it is on my wish list now, and we will see if I get to it. And if you like what you're hearing, please rate and review on your podcatcher of choice. Just helps people find me more organically. And until next time, go play some Iron Sworn.